Thank you, Mr. Ambassador. הדובר הבא הוא פרופסור עוזי ארד.
The next speaker is Professor Uzi Arad from the IDC Herzliya. Please, Uzi.
אחר צהריים טובים.
Good afternoon. I will focus directly on the topic that I think defines and will define in the coming years the relationship between Israel and the United States, and that is the challenge of Iran and the test that it is for Israel, but even more so for the United States. Things have been said, very important things have been said yesterday and today, and in light of these, and I do not want to repeat them, but I will base my words on them. And I would like to focus solely on one aspect, and that is the American aspect. Because as soon as you begin asking whether there is an Israeli-American outlook that is joint, and where we agree and where we disagree, then you find that indeed in certain places we may be seeing things differently. And it's almost not the same way within the American administration. Is it not that the people who are dealing with these issues in the United States, until they reach the democratic decision by the president, do they not see things differently sometimes? And within Israel itself, is there monolithic? Is there conformism? No, there are differences, and these differences are natural because there are many aspects of judgment, understanding, knowledge, and a need for analysis, a strategic analysis that is very complex, because the alternatives are so difficult, especially in light of the alternative of accepting a nuclear Iran. So just the structuring of this term, in terms of whether we're seeing things eye to eye, is compromising. And I will make it easy for myself, and I will only focus on one aspect, and that is the American one. I will put Israel on the side just for convenient purposes. First of all, I believe that what has been said yesterday is very true, and I agree with them, that the United States has a very defined objective and a very defined goal in this respect, and we should learn it well, because it has been said by the experts and by the authorized people, and it's been said for the last 60 years that the United States is determined, and I emphasize determined, to avoid, and I also want to underline the word avoid, that it wants to project or express action, whether it be developing nuclear weapons or acquiring nuclear weapons, and there is no objective that is clearer. But those who want to look for more clarifications by the United States, then they have said yesterday that the United States does not adjust to itself, it does not adopt containment thinking or deterrence thinking. These are two terms that do imply accepting a nuclear Iran, and the United States will not even consider such an approach. It is in the avoidance stage, and as for prevention stage, and as for the prevention, we know that all the means are on the table, and the powerful or the forceful factor. There are different types of force. There is the more demolishing, the more destructive, and the less destructive. So all of these means are on the table, and none of them are being ruled out. Logic tells us that if the means, certain means, will not achieve the purpose, then in order to stay in line with the objective, we will turn to other tools and other means. And so the United States has a wide range of means by which we have seen the development of the American strategy. In this administration, they have gone from looking for contact to a policy of isolation, and through sides of increased pressures and monitored pressures, and the type of sanctions are also they're increasing, and this is a very diligent action, and it's no small achievement that on the American table, on the American side, we're seeing China and Russia sitting with them, and they are the five, and they are the permanent five on the Security Council, and they are also, and don't you forget it, the original nuclear club, so to speak, and they are countries that know a thing or two about nuclear, and all of these are on the side opposite Iran, and this is no small achievement in and of itself. So if we are leading the campaign, if the United States is leading the campaign against Iran, we're already in the midst of taking action, and the military option is perhaps left, and maybe logically, the last resort, only if all the others will not achieve this objective in pleasant manners, and we'll talk about twisting arms and pressures a pleasant way. And this is the American plan. That's the way it's been stated, and that we've heard examples yesterday of that, and there's no reason to doubt the truthfulness of it. And the question is, if America needed to draw its sword, will it do so? And the answer is yes, of course. That is exactly why it is such a superpower. The difference between a superpower and smaller powers is not in the ambition of the objectives, it is in the extent of the means. And of course, the United States has the means. And I would even go as far as to say that if the United States comes to the point where it decides to use force, then it will be the decisive factor. But I would like to add two more aspects to the discussion. The challenge, I have to remind you, is not just to strike Iran. The challenge is to prevent it from, in the long range, from reaching and obtaining nuclear weapons. And that is an ongoing mission, an ongoing task that needs to be carried out in the long term. And for that, you need to have resources and abilities to revisit these things again and again, to maintain and preserve a certain regime. And so if the need arises, the strike we will strike again. And only the United States has such a long breath, so to speak, and it will be able to reach this objective and achieve these goals in the long range. And some in the United States are being humble, and they do not think they can achieve these goals. They're saying there are too many goals. But as a student of the American School of Thought, I think that the objectives taken up by the United States and the force it had to use, these are one of the easiest. To make Iraq a democracy, that is difficult. Armies do not do things like that, and all of a sudden we have logics that we have to go. We have a logical argument that has gone upside down, and we now need to take a physical plan and put it into action. That is the kind that military means are supposed to achieve, and that is achievable. And that is why I think that if the United States gets to a point where it needs to take these measures, it will do so, and it will be faithful to itself. And therefore, whoever wants to put its trust in Iran, then say Iran will never be nuclear, so long as the United States is true to itself and to what it says. But we have not reached that time where the decision needs to be made, and the timing has come up this morning in a discussion, and it is truly problematic, but this timing also defines itself and is derived from the extent of how far away from a nuclear bomb Iran is. It's not just a mere technicality. Whoever knows the specifics of this issue knows that in terms of timing, it depends on how far away Iran is from the objective that it is striving towards. And so we know that when the decision comes, the decision will have to be made before they achieve their goal. Although I have to say that even if they were to achieve their goal, for instance, under the North Korean plan, even then it doesn't mean that we cannot terminate the Iranian nuclear program with various means. But right now the logic tells us that we shouldn't be doing this at the last minute, not at the last second, but well in time. And if people are amusing themselves with finding terminology for all sorts of purposes of convenience, such as immunity, let me talk about the instability, the space of instability, because as long as Iran halts or is even frozen at a distance that is not too far, weeks or months from groundbreaking, then this expanse or this space will be unstable. It will be an expanse that will cause the parties here in the Middle East to be with their fingers on the trigger, because as long as this distance is shortened, then we're having an opportunity or a possibility for eruption. And so we need to stop this or prevent this as early as possible, because that's the real problem. Iran is already in an inconvenient spot. And some say, and it's been said now, that the demands made last night by the Prime Minister are impossible demands. And perhaps, tactically speaking, under the circumstances of the negotiations, they are indeed unachievable. But I'll have to say, that contrarily, should the Iranians say okay and accept each and every one of the demands made, it would be a considerable achievement, because in terms of time, it takes Iran back from being near the nuclear weapon, but it does not solve the problem entirely, because we will still be required to find the means to do more than that, to dismantle infrastructures, certain facilities, which have a more pervasive and intrusive regime. And the problem is much more complex, because even those three demands will not suffice. And the moment of decision is upon us. And it is nearing us for two reasons. First of all, because they are already making progress. Slowly but surely they are making the progress. And anyone can play this game, this number game, how long it will be before they run forward and race forward. And people are doing so, but you should do it professionally and cautiously. But this moment is also coming near us and is upon us, because even in our humble and modest demands that Professor Blackwell offered and proposed, he did not propose that the Washington should be going forward with this. It doesn't mean that the Iranians will accept these, because the sobriety may be very fast. And if so, it will be obvious that in a pleasant manner we will not be achieving the halt in the Iranian race for nuclear. And if we're exhausting all our opportunities, what do? We wait a year with nothing. The reality may bite us and may hit us in the progress is done in the same way. So the moment of decision is upon us, and I'm not talking about an Israeli decision per se. I'm talking about the United States.
And then we ask the question, if when America said that if all the other means are taken and they will not achieve the declared goal, then it will go for, as a last resort, to the means that will make a decision. On the face of it, the answer should be yes, but apparently in the air, people are not 100% convinced, and here there's a question of credibility. Credibility is a sacred term in the American history. Why are there any question marks? First of all, between declaration and deed, the road is usually very long. And people pinpointed all sorts of trends that perhaps are happening in the states of the United States, and it's not in that path that it's going to do the deed from the original rationale in order to prevent the nuclear run. But now it it's in a turning point in its policy. And other people will say that perhaps since within the United States, in spite of the declarations, many bodies, which is a brother organization, the RUN Institute, published a report. It talks about containment and prevention, and it prepares the United States to the inevitable, namely nuclear Iran. All these things throw doubts. And now I want to say a word to conclude from my opinion. I would like to believe, and I do believe, that the United States is going to do something if it comes to that. But I do think that credibility has to be strengthened. It is needed tactically even now, so that there will be a chance for an agreement in the present context, a satisfying agreement for the United States, for the five, not Israel. We said, let's forget Israel for a moment, so that there will be a chance for the risk that will satisfy the United States itself. They have to convey more determination to the fact that if it doesn't work, there will be an American turning to a different means. That will mean the success of the present negotiations. That's why strengthening the credibility, maybe declaratively or by making a timetable or to say what will happen. If not, this is still required. It is required also so that it will radiate on Israel, and it's also required so that it will radiate on other things. Therefore, maybe they have to express themselves in a way that will strengthen their credibility of sticking to the objective. I personally believe that there is a good chance that the United States is going to do the deed. But that's because I lean on 40 years of history where the United States is the one who always did the opposite of what Kennedy foresaw in 50, that in the 2000 there'll be 25 nuclear countries. But in 2000 there was about a third of that. And the fact that many countries did not achieve nuclear weaponry, in a way, it owes its existence to the efforts of proliferation, of preventing proliferation by the United States. But the United States filled an historical global role in preventing their proliferation, and it negated this terrorized vision that Kennedy felt at the time. And I hope that a democratic young president like him, who will be in office, will not see in his second term the greatest breakthrough to proliferation in the area. And just because of that, and I'm aware of the fact that he's aware of that, I believe that he's going to stick to what he said. I think that it's also obvious in the United States, and that crosses all parties. It's not something that's controversial between the parties. If the Republicans become the women, there's no other option. And if President Obama stays, he said already what he had to say. They understand also the meaning of default, not doing the deed in the moment of truth when they get to it, and it might come close, means a collapse which will not only radiate on the Middle East and its stability, but even on those interests that the United States wants to develop in the Asian area. So since I believe in the American awareness, and out of the fact that I saw the consolidation of all these things, I am ready to say that I think that this might be done. But to say I'm sure of it or that I'm convinced, no way. I will never say that. And last word about Israel, after all, short. Joint objectives for partner countries you can achieve by joint means. That's what I used to think, and as much as I could, I tried to contribute, and still I do believe that together, in such a combination of the strategic objective of preventing Iran from becoming nuclear, is going to be achieved. Thank you.